So here's the deal. I did not have a video scheduled. I was going to do a review on the Harmony Bobcat that we've got in wait for repairs, and I've got a line of repairs that starts here and ends about 3 blocks away, and some of them are really heavy, like full-on restorations. So I had this job, and the frets are all done. I did a bunch of fret dressing on it. This is that Epiphone Riviera that I had mentioned a friend of mine had brought by, and as I was looking at a finish crack near the headstock that I had previously assumed was strictly a finish crack, unfortunately, when we pulled the nut, there was a gap between the headstock and the fretboard, and it does fluctuate depending on how much you lean on the headstock. So it looks like my quiet Saturday has turned into a repair day, and that's okay, because that's the way that we get it. The good news is that this one actually is going to be too difficult to fix, and I'm going to show you real fast how to go ahead and remedy a certain type of headstock break on some Epiphones and some Gibsons. Let's get to it. If I take my finger right there and just push, you can see the neck separating from the fretboard. If I move my hand up a little bit, you could really get this to move, and I am barely touching this. I am just resting my thumb upon it, and that's not going to work. But there's some good news. The good news is that this particular type of brake has a tendency of shutting itself, of closing itself off and sealing itself. As the strings pull down towards the center, they pull the headstock forward, closing the gap. So this isn't too bad. We just have to go ahead and separate the gap slightly, fill it with Titebond, and close it up. Here's the bad news. In order to be able to do this effectively, you are going to have to put your hand on that headstock, secure that guitar, and open that gap up. And I can't tell you how unsettling it is to do this if you hear any slight cracking noises. You are going to have to now force the headstock backwards. And on this one, there is not really any way to really quantify how much pressure you're putting. So you're going to have to just be very observant and take your time. Chances are this broke along a grain line, so it might actually be a pretty clean break. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to gently force this headstock back. Use your good judgment. If you do this too much to try to get as much glue in there as is possible, which is a good thing, there's a very good possibility that the headstock could just snap right off in your hand. So, no guarantees. But it's already broken, isn't it? So you've got your Titebond right here. And then what I've got is I've got this little cheap brush that I bought down at the hardware store. I'm going to go ahead and start dropping glue in here, and I'm going to take my time because I don't want to cloud this channel with a bunch of junk. What I want to do is I want to make sure that when it's all said and done, we only have enough glue where it is starting to slightly protrude from this line and this line as well. So we got to take our time and make sure that we do not alter the dimensions of this channel at all, or we're going to have to start working with the nut. We don't want to make more work, we want to fix what we've got. Okay, so we are putting our Titebond in the crevice. We're using our cheap paintbrush to knock it down and into the grain. If we don't do this, we're not going to get a real good permeation of the glue down and into the grain, so you have to knock it down and in there. You could also warm up Titebond to break down the viscosity a little thinner, but it doesn't really break down that much, and you might wind up just having it dry in a pan. So what I do instead is I use the paintbrush. Just keep knocking it down there until the grain no longer takes any more material. Another thing you can do is you can also take an Allen key and drop it down into the truss rod adjustment if you're worried about glue getting in there and distorting it and making a mess. That is something you can do to safeguard there. So obviously you see here, after we're done, it's not accepting any more glue. What we're going to do is we are going to go ahead and start the cleanup phase to make sure that we are not creating more work for ourselves. Okay, did another quick cleanup. So now you see it's completely meeting in the middle. You squish it and you get a little bit of a bulge, and I'm actually okay with that. If I pull forward on the headstock, same deal. So it looks like our geometry is maintained. The headstock was never off, so the grain orientation is all proper. And believe it or not, actually the Titebond has had a slight filling effect on this groove right here. Not so much on the cracks and stuff like that, because that's not really what we're going for. This is not a cosmetic restoration right now. Right now, we just want to stabilize the neck, especially after I put on all these work on these frets, because I ain't gonna lie, they came out really nice. They're super fancy, and I am a fancy man. You'll see that I've got it laying flat. That's about the amount of the bead that you would want on there. I'm actually going to clean that up a little bit more because I want the nut to sit completely flush against the edge of the fretboard. And right over here you can see where we've got a couple dimples where the glue had a chance to get down and in, and then when we actually laid it on its back, the weight of the guitar pushed on the headstock and closed up the gap. So that's good. So all you're doing is you're just putting the guitar on the table, putting a cloth underneath the headstock, and just allowing the weight of the guitar to steadily transmit pressure down into that crack. And you're good to go. Now, about 10 years ago, I had an Epiphone Casino that broke in the same exact way. I didn't break it. I got it. It was already broken. Not shifting blame, just saying. And the truth of it is that it was the same exact type of repair. I did an even quicker and messier job. That guitar is still being played almost every single day by a touring musician. He loves it. He would never get rid of it. I'm glad he liked it as much as he did. He knew about the break. He knew it couldn't last forever. But so far, it has. So in this case, the owner, Chris, of this guitar was pretty lucky that when it got shipped to him, it was broken, luckily, in a way in which the repair was not particularly complex. This repair is already almost done. I'm gonna wait for it to kick off. I'm gonna wait for it to kick off real good. I want that stuff to be completely yellow clear. That lets me know that it's dry and that it is stabilized. Then after that, I'm gonna go in with a bit of wet dry paper around that crack because pushing it back and forth has created distortions in the finish and where it's resting. You gotta remember the finish is inflexible, it's hard, it's basically plastic on this guitar because it's a poly finish. So we're gonna have to wet sand that to make it so that it is not perceptible to the fingers because the fingers will always feel everything that even the eyes miss. And then after that, what we've gotta do is we've gotta actually dye a little bit of nitro red, clear and darker so that we can replicate the translucent finish on the back of this, fill in the chips, wet sand it. No one should be able to see the repair and most certainly should not be able to hear a looseness in the tone or a lack of clarity in chord work because of the distortion to the wood. Anyway, that's all I got for you. Nice simple repair on a 4th of July weekend. I'm gonna do this just enough so that I feel justified in taking a walk, going down to the beach and getting out into the sun because it's just far too pretty. If you are not working on guitar, please ensure that you are at least playing one. And if you do mean to go to the beach, take it with you. Hey, whatever, people like music. The only difference between a bunch of people sitting around doing nothing and a party is loud music, so go get some. Happy 4th of July, enjoy your holiday, and be safe. And thanks for watching, you guys. I really appreciate it, and we'll see you next week.